a code red for humanity. Curb emissions and dramatically reduce consumption or face a world that is fundamentally different.
Changes in ice sheets, deep ocean temperature, they are irreversible and will continue for generations to come.
There is no planet B. There is no planet blah. Blah, 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 blah.
It is unequivocal that human activities are responsible for climate change.
If unprecedented changes are not made and made soon, there will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Zero carbon.
East Talk. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista Series 4, Fool's Gold. I'm Ian Collins and this is the UK's #1 environment-based podcast. If it's green, it's in. And it would be somewhat of an understatement to say that many things have happened since we took our summer break. We've got a new Prime Minister, a new monarch, and a new energy policy, it seems. Not unreasonably, our man on the scene to digest, opine, and occasionally get the hump is the green entrepreneur and environmentalist Dale Vince. Dale, morning.
Yeah, morning, Ian. It has been a long time, and I think that's a great way to sum it up, actually. New Prime Minister, new monarch, new energy policy. I think you nailed it there.
I mean, what's not to like?
All of them.
I was going to say, this is like, in one respect, Dale, I looked at this morning and I thought this is kind of like Dale's dream trio of subjects in terms of getting your teeth into this. I mean, let's start with Liz Truss, the former old Lib Dem lefty turned right-wing Tory. What the hell's gone on there?
Yeah, what can we say, right? Liz Truss was voted by 60,000 Tory party members to be our next prime minister, right? I mean, what kind of democracy do we live in? As Putin pointed out quite validly, I think, call that a democracy, fair play.
Yeah, when Russia are going, wow, they do it like that, then you have to kind of sit up and wonder. And of course, what's interesting about her is that she spent the best part of the summer playing to the crowd in a way that Nigel Farage would have looked at and gone, well, I wouldn't have gone that far. But that was her kind of thing, really. She was trying to ingratiate herself with the old Tory faithful, and in doing so, introduce fracking and more Brexit and more Rwanda. It couldn't have been more to the right. It makes Boris Johnson look like Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, I think that's fair as well. And, it's a particularly right-wing audience that she was playing to. And, Rishi did a little bit of that himself. And I think they both pulled off a number of U-turns in terms of policy during the campaign. Obviously, Liz pulled off the biggest U-turn of all when she got elected. Elected's wrong, isn't it? Chosen. In terms of the energy policy, during the campaign, she said no handouts, very Thatcher of her. And then first thing she did, how about a couple of $100 billion to solve this energy, well, not solve it, but just to take away the pain for a winter or two right up to the next election.
I did hear, and who knows whether this is true, that, that was a whole load of U-turns there, and stand by for another load of U-turns when she reverts back to what she really thinks, which actually she's a Remainer. She's not really pro-fracking. Or half the things that she said she would do, she won't actually do.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because during the campaign, she said she would bring back fracking where local people wanted it, right? And I thought to myself, that is such an important caveat. That means fracking will never happen because local people never want it. Right now, well, something's happened on the fracking front, hasn't it? She's taken away the ban. She's overriding scientific evidence around earthquakes. The latest report that was sat on for the summer says that actually there's no certainty here. There's no safety. We still have a problem with earthquakes, but she's ignoring that and saying, do you know what? You can go ahead. I haven't read anything yet in the news that says local people still need to support it.
It's interesting because when we've talked about this before, I've filled a switchboard on the radio with people who are in the locality, Lancashire and areas such as that. And interesting, I would say nearly all Tory voters who are saying, we don't want this. This is not what we want. So it doesn't even divide down party lines as she's suggesting. No. These are local people who would ordinarily be conservatives who are saying, we don't want this old shit going on in our backyard because the last time you tried it, I was jogged out of bed every night for a week.
That's right. And, one of the stunning things about the decade during which Osborne and Cameron tried to force fracking on us by changing planning laws, environment laws, property laws, and with this most generous tax regime in the world they boasted of, one of the most surprising things was the kinds of people that it brought onto the streets to picket at gates and protest against fracking. fracking. I mean, the opposition to fracking in our country is overwhelming. All of the opinion polls show that 70 to 80% of people do not want it. And for onshore wind, it's actually the other way around. But we have a complete ban on both at the moment. Except for fracking now, of course, because this new policy says actually it could happen. But it remains to be seen whether the devil is in the detail and local people have to support it, because they definitely don't.
Yeah, but that group, that 60,000, the old Tory faithful, that lot seem to like it. As my old nan used to say about that lot, what a bunch of
Okay, well, I'm with your old nan on that one, let me tell you.
What about
I heard it without the bleep, okay?
Indeed. What about the policy itself on energy? So she comes back to the House of Commons, all bells and whistles. We've solved the problem for people struggling, and we're going to put this price cap in. So your bill, you thought your bill might be £3,000, £5,000, £7,000 a year. I got quoted on my gas if I wanted to protect it at a fixed rate. Thank goodness I didn't do that. And she's locked it in at $2,500 for, I think, 2 years. What do you make of this?
Quite a lot of things, actually. Firstly, it was most important that there was some intervention to take the sting out of the price rises. Ofgem was about to put the price cap by 80%, which was going to make energy bills unaffordable, simply unaffordable to millions of people. So we put out a 3-point plan a few weeks ago through all the media that would let us do that. For Truss, which was to say fund the gap between energy bills now and energy bills in October, impose a cap on North Sea gas, because that's where the runaway profits are being made and the pain is being caused, and half our gas comes from there, by the way, and break the link between the price of electricity and the price of gas, because that's the other half of the problem.
Yeah,
right.
Tell us about that link.
Yeah, well, it's crazy, right? Gas is super expensive globally. We allow global markets to set the price that we pay for North Sea gas. We need to stop that and put in a cap. Let's give them a 2% profit margin like energy suppliers have, and the price of gas will collapse. But meanwhile, the high price of gas causes gas-powered electricity to be super high, but only 40% of our electricity comes from gas. But it's dragged up the price of the other 60% because that's how the market is allowed to work. So that needs market intervention to break that link. And those two measures together, cap the North Sea and break the link, would take our energy bills back to October 21 to really rather normal levels. Yeah. But right now, Truss has done the first thing. She's bridged the gap. And actually, the government are looking at breaking the link. The third thing, what they're refusing to do is price cap North Sea gas. I don't understand why, except they must have friends in the oil and gas industry. Oh, and actually, it was revealed that Liz Truss had £100,000 donation to her leadership campaign from the wife of an oil industry executive. So maybe there's
so cynical, Dale.
Maybe there's a link. I don't know. But
As if there could ever be a link.
Yeah. It's crying out to be done, though, right?
Well, it is. And just go over, if you can, what is happening elsewhere? Like France, for example, they're going to cap energy rises at 15% or something. What's going on in the rest of Europe?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the stark statistics of just about a week ago, my favorite one to share on media was this. In France, they've had a 3% price rise. In Germany, they've had a 30% price rise. And in Britain, we're facing a 300% price rise. That's changed now because of the government's intervention. Yeah. And the French have just come out and said from next year, they will freeze energy prices at a 15% increase, taking away 90% of the problem for the French. They've got the lowest inflation rate in Europe because of their intervention. They've forced their energy company, which is 90% public owned anyway, to sell energy at less than cost. They're being sued, by the way, by EDF,
yeah, I saw that.
Which I find super amusing.
Yeah, we want our money back, basically.
Sue your biggest shareholder and your own national government. I love that all at the same time. And Europe collectively are pursuing energy consumption reduction plans. They're targeting a 15% reduction. Back over here in Blighty, government ministers say, energy efficiency is a personal choice. That's brilliant, right?
Because they're proposing windfall levies, right, in the EU.
And that 140 billion of windfall levies on energy companies to help pay for this bill intervention that just about everybody in Europe is already doing. And over here, of course, we can't have a proper windfall levy. We can't price cap North Sea gas. We can't have a government leading an energy efficiency program. Even public information around energy efficiency, our government won't do. So there's a big old contrast between us still and the rest of Europe. But at least we've got this massive intervention. I'd say the one downside is we have to pay for it. So for the next decade or two, we'll all be paying back this bill, which will probably total by the next election something like £200 billion, which is it's a shitload of money, right?
What would have... So obviously Labour, the Lib Dems and others said, just a windfall tax on energy companies. I mean, you are a person that runs an energy company. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. So on the same day that Liz Truss announced her intervention on bills, the handout that's not a handout, the Treasury estimated that the oil and gas sector will make 170 billion excess profits during the energy crisis. That 170 billion sits pretty close to the likely cost of bill intervention that the government have announced. It just makes so much sense to take the money from where it's been gained improperly and put it back to where it's been taken from improperly.
Could it be, and this is a strange curveball, let's move on to the other big bit of news, of course, that the Queen died last week. We now have a king. That king has been quite vocal on environmental issues. Now, you might say not nearly enough, or that there's issues around, or you don't even believe him, frankly, but he certainly talked about it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in his early days, he talked about talking to plants, didn't he? And stuff like that. Yeah. And that got him a reputation for being a bit green and a bit quirky. But, those two things aren't the same thing, right? Being green and being quirky. And I'm not sure how green he really is. I've chatted to him a couple of times, not recently, I mean, years ago, about stuff, renewable energy. And he was then opposed to big wind. He said, he gets it, but they're just too big and he prefers the little ones, which is a pretty impractical outlook to have. And says to me that he's not actually green. But he may have changed his view.
I mean, he certainly, or those around him, have created the mood music that's his kind of direction of travel. The problem is, of course, I mean, he got into trouble when he was Prince Charles for saying things that he's not meant to say. Now he's the king. I mean, the likelihood he's going to keep stum on this stuff. Yeah,
maybe you're right. I was thinking then, as you said, that maybe he'll be really outspoken and radical and all them kind of things. But you're right, probably not. It's a very conservative kind of institution, isn't it? The monarchy and everything around it.
But apparently he's breached the protocol already because in terms of not getting involved in public conversation, because as we know, on Monday, there is a state funeral. The world has lost its mind and closed everything down, including hospital appointments. Can you believe it? The word from the palace is that he said, look, this is, a bit overkill. We're not asking people to do this. But individuals are either so shit scared of being seen to be insensitive, or companies think it's going to be really bad if we open up for, the X-ray department. No, that's not bad. That's a sensible thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on, right? A lot of kind of suppression, repression of people's genuine feelings, right? Not everybody in this country is a fan of the monarchy. I think recent opinion polls show that just over half the people in our country are, and that's fallen by something like 10 or 11% in the last decade. So, it's a kind of rapidly declining popularity for the notion of having a queen, or now a king. But you wouldn't think so to look at the media, right? I mean, I don't have a telly, thank God. But if I did, I think I'd be feeling pretty sick of all of the coverage of what's been going on. I mean, it's just it's overkill. I mean, it is overkill. It's simply that.
Do you know what? I was just thinking about this, though. I mean, the first thing I would do if I was king is say, right, can we just lose this little rule that I'm not allowed to make opinions known? Because I'd have opinions on everything. I'd be making all those changes. I'd go, well, you can't stop me. I'm the king, for God's sake. Well, yes, we will build those windmills. Well, how can you say this? Because I'm the king. Surely, if there's one thing you can do as a king, and that's surely make some proclamations.
Well, interestingly, what we do know is that behind the scenes, the Queen as was and the King as is have an awful lot of influence in laws that are made in our country. Basically, they get to approve them or not, and they get to carve out for themselves their own interests if they don't like the look of them. And the best example of that was in Scotland, where a law was passed allowing cables for renewable energy across anybody's land. The Queen said, yeah, fine, anybody except mine, right? One of the biggest landowners in the country. And there's that kind of thing, that kind of power that the King or Queen actually has in our country, which is completely against the notion of democracy and equality and all that kind of stuff. So there is power for the king. If I was king, right, or if I was advising him, my suggestion would be take no public money, right? Just declare yourself financially independent from the state. Say, look, I understand it's a time of cost of living crisis, all kinds of problems in the world. I don't need your several £100 million a year to run this thing because actually I'm a billionaire. It's not a problem. And I'll sort this out myself. And I think that would endear himself to the people incredibly.
I think it would.
Even me, right?
Yeah. Then he can say, don't put the cables on my land.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
Let's just, before we move on to some questions, we've got plenty of those, Dale. Just another element of the Liz Truss government. Animal welfare. Now, this, of course, is an area that I know not only you feel incredibly passionately about, but you've always argued consistently that it's so interlinked with issues around the environment that it should be right up there at the top of the agenda. Liz Truss has a very different view on this, apparently.
Apparently, but remember this, as we learned during the leadership campaign, Liz Truss was responsible when Britain shut down its gas storage, which is giving us this chronic problem last winter and this winter. She was also responsible for the budget cutting at the Environment Agency, which has led to the incredible pollution of our rivers and beaches with sewage. So she's kind of got form, right, in making the wrong decisions. And apparently she doesn't really give a shit about animal welfare. The term itself, by the way, is some big old kind of oxymoron or estate agent speak, right? When farmers talk about animal welfare, I think, my God, what are you doing? It's like they're like the guards at a death camp, right? And the actual welfare that they're talking about, I mean, it's just a joke. There is no welfare in animal farming. And animal farming is, as you were touching on, one of the biggest problems that we face and we have to deal with. But when I hear farmers talking about animal welfare, I'm just like, oh God, you must be talking about CSR as an oil and gas company, right? Oh, we've got a CSR program for that. Great.
Yeah, it's that, isn't it? It's exactly that. Let's have some questions. Jane on Twitter. What do you make of Forest Green Rovers' season so far? Is this your plan?
Well, I would say it is our plan, to play football in League One. And we weren't expecting to run away with the league, but you'll know that. And I would say I'm quite happy with what's happened so far. If you look at the fixtures we've had, we played some very top teams. We're not in the drop zone as of a few days ago.
No, you're not. You had a draw, didn't you, last?
So. Yeah, that's right, against Charlton. Right?
But also, I think at this stage of the season, I'm always fascinated by tables at this stage of the season. If you look at Peterborough, I think they're about 7th in the league. And the difference between Forest Green Rovers, there's one win in it, basically, to change those positions. So it's too early days, right? I know that sounds like always the excuse that's given, but it's so early. There's no way anyone can ascertain what might happen in the next 3 months.
Yeah, and in football, it's normal to say, let's judge it after the first 10 games. And then if you don't like the look of that, you say, well, let's judge it at Christmas.
Indeed.
But the table doesn't lie by the time you get to round about March or April or something like that. That's fairly realistic. But we're not even 10 games in yet. And
exactly.
We're 2 points off the middle of the table. Similar to how you pointed out.
Absolutely right. Here's a question from Michael. Come on, Dale. Where is this darn hovercraft? Is the campervan on the road yet? So many questions for this new series.
Tell me about it, right? The hovercraft. We've had some problems with it. I've got to chase it up in the next couple of days, but we've got some bugs in the software that means the motor keeps cutting out. We're on the verge. It won't be long. The campervan, the guys tell me that any day now the wheels will be turning. They'll be ready for that road test. So we are close. And now that we're back on the air, I'll be able to tell you all about it. Hopefully next week I'll have something to say.
Fantastic. And this one from Viv on Twitter. Why do you think the Telegraph keeps attacking green energy tariffs?
I don't know. I think it's all part of the kind of right-wing establishment, who've been saying that this energy crisis is due to green levies, which is such a ridiculous thing to say, or that fracking and North Sea oil drilling can solve this crisis, which is basically a fossil fuel crisis, and it can't make any difference to it at all. I mean, these people don't live in the real world.
There it is. Dale, fabulous first show on the new series. Loads to come. We are not going to run out of material. That's absolutely sure in the coming weeks. Have a cracking weekend.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. You too.
We'll speak to you next week. That's it for this episode. Don't forget, of course, you can follow this podcast from your podcast provider. That way you get each new episode automatically. Leave a review there too. Really important bit. Follow Dale on social media, twitter.com/DaleVince, facebook.com/DaleVince.
Zero carbon
east of